Bates, the Penn GSE team, Professor Laura Desimone is here. Laura, she's going to come up and follow me with the second half of this presentation, and Meredith Richards is here. I just mentioned Meredith is a IES postdoc, since this is an IES sponsored thing, and we had actually involved at one point or another postdoc and 3 pre-docs from the IES pre-doc program as well. And also I want to mention Bob Baruch, another professor at GSE who's been involved in this. And then my student Ray Yang, who couldn't be here today, he's in China. So that was a great laying out of the study, I thought, and I will say it's really exciting and a pleasure to be a part of such a terrific, and I would say far-flung team. You know, we really have a lot of focused talent focused in this area and that area, and we've come together and worked, I think, pretty well collectively, probably thanks to Joe's genius as a leader. I guess the 2 big takeaways for me after that hour-long presentation was this is big and it's complicated. With this set of results here, I'm going to try to figure out how not to get too far down in the weeds so you can get the big picture, and then if you want, if there's time, we can get more into the weeds in follow-up. So that's going to be my strategy. So the overview, first thing is, so this team, this Penn GSE team, we had kind of a test construction thing and an analysis role. So on the test construction side, as they've said, there are 6 units, 3 FOSS and 3 Holt. We built a student achievement test for each one of those 6 units. And each one of those tests was built to be aligned to that particular unit, and it was given immediately upon completion of the unit. That was the basic design. So we also had, as somebody asked over here, 6 teacher content knowledge tests, 1 for each of those 6 units. And it was aligned to what Bates's team told us was the focus of their professional development. So we didn't focus it directly on the materials being taught. We focused it on what the deliverers of that professional development said. If their instruction was 100% successful, the teachers participating would know and be able to do. Those of you who are in the testing business, if any of you are, know that you try very hard not to write your own items when you have a short time frame, because it's very hard to do. You need to pilot them. We were on a fast track. So our approach was to get public release items, NAEP public release items, state test public release items. We used for the teacher knowledge, Praxis public release items. We used then some banks from somebody down in Louisville, I'm forgetting right now. But anyway, we got as many of these items as we could to create for each one of those 6 units a domain of teacher knowledge items and a domain of student achievement items. Then we build an algorithm that selects from the domain the most aligned item to the target, which is the description of what the materials were. And then that's a test of length 1. And our tests of student achievement were 18 items plus the 6 rotated forms that was talked about. So in my results, I'll talk about the 18 items on the student test. For the teacher test, there were 25 items. This is good because you're going to want to know, when I give you these means and these raw scores, how well did they do against what was possible. Then we had this, for Holt, we have the state test. It's called the PSSA. It's given in 8th grade. That works okay for us because our units were cells in 7th and the other 2 in 8th grade, so it was reasonably there. We're not so sure we're going to be able to use the state test in FOSS. It goes across Pennsylvania and Arizona. It's given in 8th grade, but the FOSS units are in 6th and 7th, and it's not. alignment is a serious problem. We'll consider it, but we're not sure how we're going to come out on that. So today I'll show you how we did in terms of the total score on the state test. But we're using that same algorithm to select aligned subscales from the 64 items that are on the state test. So we say cells, here's a unit. What are the items that are on cells? Pull them, extract them from the 64. That's a subtest that's aligned. And if any of you are interested in that algorithm, there's a manuscript available. Just email me. I'm happy to send it. We're shooting for ER. We've got to revise and resubmit. I guess they call it reject and resubmit these days. I don't know what happened there, but so on the teacher knowledge test, here are the means. Remember I said there are 25 items on the test, and those are just the means for the 3 units and the control, content, and cog sci. And none of the results are statistically significant. In other words, we did not get an effect on our teacher content knowledge test. Our content intervention didn't improve it over control. Our cog sci intervention didn't improve it over control. There just were no differences there. So when you interpret the results on student achievement, you have to realize we didn't move the needle on content, at least in ways that we could measure. So when you see that the content intervention didn't work that well, you can't interpret, just as a foreshadowing, that content's unimportant. We just weren't able to move the needle on content. So that was a big disappointment. So this slide has got a lot of numbers. These are all means, and remember they're on those 18 items, so you can see that the achievement is not, they didn't top out. There was room for more growth in achievement. And then we used a 3-level HLM student class in school, and we did tests of significance. We had 2 years of state student achievement data on reading and mathematics for each student as control variables. Then we had all of their NCLB demographics as well. In these results, we didn't test for any interactions with those demographics. That's coming later. So all those variables were in the model, but this is only main effects today. And green means it was significant at the 0.5 level, and yellow means it was significant at the 0.1 level. And you'll see that the contrast were cog sci versus content versus control and cog sci versus content. You're kind of wondering what happened to content versus control. There were no significant differences there on student achievement, so it's not in here. There's a little bit of a pattern here. It looks like the results are most favorable for the cells unit. That was the first one, and it was 7th grade. There is some green there. Actually, I probably shouldn't have confused you with raw and adjusted. Focus more on the adjusted, because that's the full model, and that's the one that you really would put the most faith in. It looks like, cohort 1 and cohort 2 cells, that's the far right. These 2 guys were, significant if you say 0.1. And then this is the teachers teaching the cells unit in cohort 2 that had taught it in cohort 1. Okay? That's what we thought everybody would be. We thought, this is, that's what I kind of thought the basic thing. It would be cohort 2 would be the money cohort. All the teachers would be in cohort 1, then they'd be back seasoned teachers teaching in cohort 2. But we have about 37% teacher turnover from year 1 to year 2. So we had to fill in. So when you look at cohort 2, it's some teachers teaching it for the second time and some teachers teaching it for the first time who were filling in to replace the teachers that we lost. But this row right here is just the teachers teaching it for the second time. And so you get you get a nice effect. This is an effect size, so it's 0.5. It was significant at the 0.5 level. Then if you go to the next unit down, ITM, you'll see that for cohort 2, we got a significant effect, but we didn't see the bigger effect for the teachers teaching it the second time there. And then for IRE, it's not quite as strong. And we have a little speculation. It was at the end of the 8th grade year, and they were getting ready for the state test. It was state testing time, and we're wondering if maybe there was a little interference there. I will say that Laura Desimone and her team is studying implementation, so we'll have a lot of we've collected a lot of information on what happened while they were teaching it. Did they cover the whole unit? Adam did a study in LA where it got negative effects. It's because the intervention, they didn't teach the unit. So, you got to worry about those kinds of things. I look at that and I say that those are pretty encouraging results because so many of these large-scale randomized field trials, they get effects on teacher behaviors, but not on the next leg out, the students. So this is not to be too terribly discouraged. Except content, that's kind of discouraging. And I can't believe that you can't get teachers to learn more content. And if you looked at those means, they had a long way to go to get to the ceiling of that test. So there was a lot of room for the intervention to have impact. That was not an issue for us. So I think, tomorrow we'll talk about implication, but I just say right now, I think that anybody who wants to get into the business of trying to improve teacher content knowledge ought to do it, but they'd have to use an approach that is foreign to the way we're thinking about things right now. It would have to be something more dramatic, something or conceptually completely different. That's what I believe from these results. Okay, so then we did, so now we'll do something that is a little premature, but we have data from 2 FOSS units, and this is not Pittsburgh, it's just Arizona data. And you can see again that in water and weather, right? Yeah, water and weather, we get cohort 1, we get the CogSci beat the content, and cohort 2, kind of a tendency that way. Now, let me just point out to you that really the contrast that you want is CogSci versus control, not CogSci versus content. And we just got the one kind of mildly significant effect there for cohort 1, CogSci versus control. So I don't know exactly what to make out of that. It looks like maybe content had a little bit of a negative effect on student achievement, but not a reliable one, and this is horrible. See, I'm a statistician, so I should never say what I just said, but it did kind of move things down a little bit, so it was like a lower bar to beat than was the control. That's all I can say. We have lots more to do on FOSS because the 3rd unit isn't in, because the data are not fully cleaned, but this is preliminary results, and we knew that there are the 2 people here from FOSS, and we felt like it would be horrible to not say at least something. But whether these results will hold up exactly, I don't know, but the other thing you should say is this is not a test of how well FOSS works. We're not contrasting FOSS to some other materials. FOSS is a constant here. It was in all 3 arms. Ours is, again, content, CogSci, control. So on the PSSA test, that's the 8th grade test, not built to be aligned to the units necessarily that we taught. It's a much more comprehensive test than that, and this is just the total scores, but there are the means. The test is of length 64 items. These are raw score means. Again, achievement not topping out. And you can see that we looked at the first line. The first line is, this includes everybody that had at least one unit. Because see, some of these students in our study just had one unit, some of them had 2 units, some of them had all 3 units. So this cut is just 1 unit, this cut is all 3 units, and this is for cohort 1, and this is cohort 2, just 1 unit, at least 1 unit, or all 3. And then here's the teaching twice. You know, the teachers, I talked about that before, the teachers that were teaching the unit for the second time. It's just their students. And there are no significant differences in here anywhere. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't get significant results on the state test, because we're going to build these aligned subtests. That's a much more fair test. So it'll still be distal. It'll be more distal than our end of unit, especially constructed aligned test, because we're stuck, we're constraining ourselves to those state items, but we'll just look at the 8 that are on cells, and then we'll just look at the 12 that are on whatever the other one is. So that's just an early look at that. I don't think we should feel too discouraged about it. I wasn't expecting that we would get effects on the state test for total score, but we could do that. Now, Meredith put together 3 slides. Somebody just opened champagne? I knew I was doing well, but I didn't know I was doing that well. So one of the questions you ask is, do you have differential attrition across the arms? And here you can see that the schools pretty much stayed in. When we lost a school, it was because we lost a teacher. A lot of these schools only had one teacher teaching the thing we were focused on. I think the average, or the median, I'm not sure which it was but across schools was about 1.3 teachers. So this is not these big middle schools with like 8 science teachers. It's more of a K-8 thing in Philadelphia. And these data look pretty good at the school level. And then we go to the teacher level, and this first column right here, this is the number of teachers for each, here's cells, ITM and IRE, and then it's control, content, and cog sci. There were 75 teachers that that number represents the number of teachers in cohort 1 that started out, plus the number of teachers that were added in cohort 2 to replace. So that's what that number is, and that's the base for these various percentage calculations. This has completed the professional development, and I'm pleased to say that this makes intuitive sense. None of the control teachers completed the professional development. So we were worried that we would get big numbers there, and that would have been bad not. But in any event, here are the teachers in cohorts 1 and 2 that completed that, and you can look on down through here. And you're not getting too much differential attrition here. I wrote down under the... So, CogSci teachers were more likely to complete professional development than content was. It's a little bit of a difference there. CogSci were more likely to give the end of unit test than either control or CogSci. Control stayed into year 2 more than CogSci or content. That's as measured by giving the end of unit test. And another thing that you can notice that I didn't realize this until just looking at this slide that Meredith prepared, but if you look at the number here, number that administered the exam, this is way more difficult than I'm used to. If you look at the number that completed they gave the end of unit test, there were more of them than completed the professional development. So not all of the teachers that are in the analysis that I showed you completed all of the professional. Now, you can think about that as an implementation, one facet of implementation. Did you get all of the training? And then another facet is, did you do what you were supposed to do? So, and then student attrition, and this one's not, this is, the starting point, these numbers show only students lost, okay? These are students that dropped out. That's the focus here. And secondly, it's only the ones that dropped out. They were rostered at the beginning of the unit, but didn't take the end of unit test. So if it's not, did they drop out over 2 years or did they drop out over 1 year? It is, did they not show up to take the test? Now, that doesn't mean they dropped out of school. They could have just, who knows, maybe the teacher sent them to the movies. I mean, joke. That's a joke. That was a joke. I take that back. But in any event, they might have been absent. There's a lot of absence and whatnot. So if you look at these numbers, this is control content and cog sci, and then these are the units, cohort 1 and cohort 2, and you can see the size of the attrition of students just in that short period of time. So there's a lot, kind of a sub-story here is that in Philadelphia, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement of teachers. I don't have it up, but there's quite a bit of movement of principals. We've even had movement of superintendent and of course, students as well. And I think you're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow, right, Joe? So we have some more analyses to do, obviously. We need to complete the FOSS, as I said. We need to look at cumulative effects on those subtests from the state to see whether, if you take all 3 units, you get a bigger effect than if you just take one, or even special combinations of units. We'll look at all of that. And then we need to test for the interactions, obviously. We've done a fair amount of that for cells, and almost none of them are statistically significant. But when Chris analyzes the data, they're all statistically significant. So we have to come to some reckoning with that. And then we have to look for mediating and moderating effects. Teacher knowledge was going to be one of our mediators. It may not produce much for us since we didn't really have an impact on it. Another mediator is the extent to which the instruction that they offered is aligned to the test that we gave, and we have them reporting in a way that allows us to make that alignment comparison. And then we have various measures of implementation. If they look like they were a more faithful implementer of the cognitive science, you get, is that mediate the cog sci? It could be this, when we stick in an implementation variable, all of those significant cog sci effects disappear. That would be a good result, because it would say we're explaining the effect on student achievement through that level of implementation. And if we got that, then that would point in directions toward, the next time around or the next mod out, we need to work a little bit harder on implementation, which is a common story to have. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Laura Desimo.